Coming up on this Thursday edition of Newsline at noon, a Korean trade official held hostage for 3 days after being kidnapped by armed men in Libya has been freed by Libyan security forces. In her opening speech at this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, President Hwang Ji-hye says her vision of a creative economy would help resolve global problems of low growth, high unemployment and income imbalance. Plus, in the aftermath of Korea's largest ever personal data breach, the nation's chief financial regulator lays out measures to prevent future leaks and to minimise the damages to those affected. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Choi Yuson in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom, and we have some good news to start off with. The Korean trade official who was kidnapped in Libya early this week has been rescued, and he is safe and unharmed.
And for more details, let's connect to our correspondent Hwang Ji-hye at the Foreign Ministry. Ji-hye, we hear the official is fine. What other details do we know at the moment?
Hello, Yusun, Mark. Certainly good news indeed. Seoul's foreign ministry has confirmed that Han Seo-gu, the head of the Libya unit of the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, also known as KOTRA, is in good health and has now been safely handed over to the Korean embassy in Tripoli after being freed by Libyan security forces. Now, the release came just 3 days after Han was kidnapped on his way home from work by a group of armed forces. And after being interviewed by the embassy about his abduction, Han is expected to travel to the Mediterranean island of Malta, where his family is residing, and return to Korea with them. Now, whether or not he will return to service post in Libya is undecided at the moment, although KOTRA has said that the decision is solely up to Han. Guys?
Well, it certainly is a great relief to know that he's in safe hands now, especially for his family there in Malta. It must have been a really hard time for them. But I suppose the question on everyone's lips now is whether Korea or someone else paid a ransom for his release.
No, there hasn't. Although there are reports that the kidnappers were demanding around $2 million in exchange for Han's release. However, Seoul's foreign ministry said that it is the principle of the Korean government not to pay ransom for the abductees, and that the ministry, in cooperation with the Libyan government, has been pouring all its efforts into securing Han's safe release ever since the day he was kidnapped. The rescue operation was led by the Libyan government, and the 4 kidnappers have been arrested by the Libyan government, and they were reportedly part of a small militia. We still don't know why Han was taken in the first place, although it is believed that the abduction was not ideologically or politically motivated, but that the kidnappers were just after money. Most of Libya has struggled with violence and unrest in recent years following the ouster and death of dictator Muammar Gaddafi, and there are nearly 2,000 such armed militias operating across the country, with foreigners often being targeted for kidnap. But this was the first time a Korean had been kidnapped in Libya, and the ministry here in Seoul says that it will thoroughly review the case to make sure that such incidents do not happen again in the future. Guys?
All right, thanks, Ji-hye. That was our Hwang Ji-hye reporting live on the safe release of Han Seo-gu, the Korean trade official who was kidnapped in Libya earlier this week.
Now over to Davos, where President Hwang Ji-hye emphasised the creative economy and entrepreneurship during her opening speech at the World Economic Forum.
And our Oh Jin-ju, who is traveling with the president, filed us this report.
President Park says the so-called creative economy will be the driving force in, quote, reshaping the world, the theme of this year's World Economic Forum in Davos. In her opening speech at the first session of the global event, President Park pointed to entrepreneurship as the key to realizing a creative economy together with creativity.
We have a saying in Korea, beads are not considered jewelry unless they are woven together. entrepreneurship is what weaves together the beats of creative ideas into new markets and into new jobs.
The president introduced Seoul's efforts to work towards a creative economy, such as setting up online and offline platforms and a public-private task force to help creative ideas develop into businesses. She vowed to ease any regulations that stand in the way of convergence and the creation of new industries by capping the total volume of regulations and presiding over a ministerial meeting to oversee such efforts. The creative economy, President Park says, could lay the path to overcoming three major challenges facing the world: low growth, high unemployment, and income disparities.
Through startups, as well as the innovation of existing businesses, a creative economy can generate new engines of growth and can grow jobs. There will also be less income inequality, since anyone with a great idea can live out one's dreams by starting a business.
When asked about concerns about the cost of reunification, an issue that keeps foreign investors from pouring money into South Korea, President Park said that reunification would be a jackpot not only for the two Koreas but also for neighboring countries.
통일이 되면은 북한 지역에 대대적인 SOC를 중심으로 한 투자가 일어나게 될 것이고, 또 이런 북한뿐만 아니라 주변국들도 어떤 큰 어떤 성장을 기대할 수가 있다.
She explained that the investments would boost other projects in, for example, China's 3 northeastern provinces and Russia's maritime territory. A notable and unexpected guest in the front row during President Park's speech was Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Many wondered whether the two leaders would meet or have a brief talk, but they didn't. Oh Jin-soo, Arirang News, Bern.
In the wake of Korea's worst ever personal data breach, the nation's financial regulator has drawn up a comprehensive set of measures. They include bolstering monitoring systems and strengthening punitive actions against firms and executives that leak personal data. Chim Myung-gil has the details.
The government announced a set of measures on Wednesday designed to prevent future leaks and minimize the damage to clients if a leak does occur. In the midst of growing public anxiety about the possible financial crimes that could be committed using the stolen data, which includes bank account, credit card numbers, and personal credit records, financial firms will now be barred from collecting an excessive amount of personal data from customers. The government will also strengthen the punishment on institutions that use client data for their marketing activities.
Financial institutions will be prohibited from using client data for marketing purposes, and the CEOs of the financial firms in question will be subject to strong punishments.
Firms that are found to have used client data for marketing could be fined up to 1% of their sales in the event of a data breach.
The government will fine banks and credit card firms up to $4.6 million if they are found to have mismanaged personal data, and client data will be automatically discarded 5 years after a client's final transaction.
The government also plans to impose heavy fines on the 3 card firms, KB국민, 농협, and Lotte, that had data stolen from the internal servers. And at the press conference Wednesday, the chairman of Korea's financial watchdog offered to take full responsibility for the data breach.
We apologize for the data leak that inconvenienced the people. We will do our best to wrap the case up quickly and promise to prevent such mishaps in the future.
The government has rolled out its strongest ever measures to raise the severity of personal data theft. And with comprehensive probes to kick off soon, the government hopes to prevent similar cases from happening again in the future. Chim Myung-gil, Arirang News.
The Korean economy is widely believed to be moving into a phase of stable recovery. The central bank says the private sector is waking up from years of slumber to drive growth. Our Hwang Ji-hye has more.
The Bank of Korea said on Thursday that the economy showed firm signs of picking up steam in the quarter ending in December. The nation's gross domestic product grew 0.9% in the fourth quarter from the previous 3 months, thanks mainly to a rise in domestic demand. It was slightly down from a 1.1% quarter-on-quarter gain in the July to September period, but that was largely because of a major cutback in fiscal spending. The central bank also confirmed that the economy grew 2.8% for all of 2013 from the previous year as earlier projected. That compares with a 2% growth in 2012 and represented a reversal of a 2-year slowdown. The bank said that the recovery came from rising exports, growing private consumption, and construction investment. Exports rose 4.3% last year from a year earlier, while private consumption went up 1.9% from 2012. Construction investment in particular rose nearly 7% last year against a 2% drop in 2012. The central bank said the Korean economy will likely continue its recovery and forecast a growth of 3.8% for 2014 and 4% for 2015. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Turning now to the bird flu crisis here in Korea. More dead ducks found in a river in southern Korea have been found, suggesting the virus is spreading. Officials are looking into whether 5 ducks found dead in Gumgang River were killed by the latest bird flu virus. The dead ducks were found about 50 kilometers from Gochanggun, the county where the highly pathogenic H5N8 strain was first detected. This comes after officials announced that bean geese were also found to be carrying the strain, along with Baikal teal ducks. So far, a total of 8 farms in Korea have confirmed bird flu cases. Another 6 farms are awaiting results to see if their birds have also been infected. Some 300,000 ducks and chickens have been culled since the virus was first confirmed a few days ago. And Korea is not the only country in Asia battling an outbreak of animal illness. In Vietnam, an increasing number of people are falling foul to swine flu, with 2 high school students, the latest confirmed as suffering from the H1N1 strain of the virus. Local media outlets report, citing quarantine authorities, that 11 other high school students in the capital, Hanoi, are undergoing tests to see whether they have also contracted it. The students were hospitalized after complaining of high fevers and coughs. The results of a closer examination are expected soon.
For your fill of Korean and international news, join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
Representatives of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and the main opposition group traded fiery exchanges on Wednesday, the first day of a major peace conference in Switzerland intended to lead the country out of civil war. Our Son Jang-in has the details.
Wednesday's talks, involving 40 or so foreign ministers, ended with little progress. The much-anticipated international talks are aimed at bringing peace to the country. However, both the Syrian regime and the Western-backed main opposition group refused to compromise on the future role of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the transitional government. Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim said that only the Syrian people could decide the fate of President Assad and called on foreign powers to stop supporting terrorism and to lift sanctions against Damascus. Opposition leader Ahmed Jarba accused Assad of war crimes and demanded the Syrian government delegation sign on to an international plan for a transfer of power. Siding with the opposition, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Assad should have no place in a transitional government. And Syria's envoy to the United Nations, Bashar al-Jarafi, said that Damascus needed support to negotiate with the opposition to implement a 2012 Geneva Communique that calls for a transitional government and said that the terrorism must also end. During the talks, there were few signs that any party was ready to make concessions. UN leader Ban Ki-moon said that the hard work begins on Friday, when direct discussions will begin in Geneva, and urged Syria's regime and opposition to work together to end the bloodshed. 손정인, Arirang News.
Turning to Ukraine now, which appears to be descending into chaos. Opposition leaders there have issued an ultimatum to the president following talks that failed to answer their demands and amid anti-government protests that turned deadly on Wednesday. Shin Se-min has more.
Ukrainian opposition leaders have issued an ultimatum to President Viktor Yanukovych: call elections within 24 hours or prepare for the worst, following the first death in a crisis that's rocked the country for 2 months. The opposition leaders emerged from talks with the president on Wednesday, aimed at quelling the escalating violence in Kiev, saying the talks have failed, with leader Vitaly Klitschko calling on supporters to prepare for a police offensive. The opposition also wants the government dismissed and harsh new anti-protest laws scrapped. The protests turned deadly Wednesday as Ukrainian riot police clashed with protesters in Kiev. These were the first fatalities since protests began in November after Yanukovych walked away from a planned treaty with the European Union in favor of closer economic ties with Russia. Protesters gathered in Independence Square, but things escalated quickly when riot police began dismantling the main protest camp there. 2 men were shot dead in the violence that followed, with hundreds of protesters injured. The European Union has threatened to take action against Ukraine over its crackdown on the anti-government protests. European Commission President José Manuel Barroso said the EU was shocked by the fatalities and would have to rethink its relationship with Ukraine with possible consequences. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Olympic committees in several nations have received anonymous emails regarding security threats to the upcoming Sochi Winter Games. Officials say the emails are a hoax, but with security fears refusing to go away, the United States has offered a helping hand to Russia. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Olympic officials have dismissed an email warning of a possible terror attack at the Sochi Games. Earlier, the U.S. Olympic Committee and several European countries, including Italy, Germany, and Hungary, received an email regarding a security threat against visitors, athletes, and officials should they attend the Games. The International Olympic Committee said the email contains no specific threat and appears to be a random message from a member of the public. IOC President Thomas Bach said he remains confident in Russia's Olympic organizers.
But we are very confident, and we know that the Russian authorities, together with their many partners internationally, are doing everything to organize the games in a safe and secure way.
In the midst of escalating concerns, the U.S. said Wednesday that it will provide full support to help Russia bolster security around the Olympic venues. White House spokesman Jay Carney said President Barack Obama also discussed safety issues with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the phone this week.
We have seen an uptick in threat reporting prior to the Olympics, which is, of course, of concern, although it is also not unusual for a major international event. And we have offered, as I said, assistance to the Russians, any assistance that they might need to counter that threat.
The U.S. has offered Russia technology that can be used to shut off explosives during the Games. On Tuesday, General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, discussed the issue with his Russian counterpart during talks in Brussels. No decisions have been made. Russia has been stepping up its internal security affairs ahead of the Olympics, which opened February 7th. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The U.S. government is calling on Korea and Japan to come to an agreement on how the body of water between the two countries should be identified. U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Marie Harf said in a press briefing Wednesday that Washington will continue to use the name Sea of Japan to refer to the body of water in line with the U.S. Board on Geographic Names. She rejected the idea of using both East Sea and Sea of Japan, saying it is a long-standing U.S. policy to only use one name for the sake of clarity. Korea considers the name Sea of Japan a legacy of Japan's imperial past as it came into use during Japan's colonial rule of Korea in the early 20th century. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has called for military restraint in Asia amid festering tensions between Japan and China over historical and territorial issues. Delivering a keynote speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos on Wednesday, Abe said, in a thinly veiled message to China, that military expansion must be kept in check and military spending must be transparent and able to be verified. He also said the international control of the sea must be respected, in a clear reference to the East China Sea Islands dispute between Tokyo and Beijing. And looking to calm concerns Japan might resort to military action, Abe said Japan has vowed never to wage a war again, and it plans to stick to that vow.
A slew of leaked files show the family members of China's political elite are hoarding huge amounts of cold, hard cash in offshore accounts. Files obtained by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists show the relatives of at least 5 current and former members of China's top leadership have been stashing assets in overseas tax havens like the British Virgin Islands. The confidential files include details of a real estate company co-owned by current President Xi Jinping's brother-in-law and British Virgin Islands company set up by former Premier Wen Jiabao's son and also by his son-in-law. By some estimates, the total amount of untraced assets moved out of China since 2000 stands at somewhere between $1 and $4 trillion. Samsung has been dealt another legal blow in a patent war with Apple. Judge Lucy Koh, who has presided over disputes between the two tech giants since 2012, has ruled that Samsung infringed Apple's autocomplete text patent. The autocomplete function suggests completed words after a user has part-typed them so messages can be inputted more quickly. The judge also threw out Samsung's claim that Apple had infringed on one of its synchronization patents on the grounds that the patent should never have been granted in the first place. This means Apple will allege 5 cases of patent infringement when both firms go into court on March 31st, while Samsung will bring in 4.
Okay, well, it's time to get a check on the weather now with our weathercaster, Jian, who's standing by, as always, at our weather center. Hello there, Jian.
A great afternoon, Mark and Yusan.
Jian, an ultrafine dust alert was issued in Seoul yesterday, and I believe that was the 6th time that happened this winter. So has the level of dust particles gotten back to normal today?
Well, dusty levels were relatively high in Seoul and the surrounding area this morning, but they're back to normal now. But with the unseasonably mild weather set to continue for the next couple of days, there could be more toxic smog on the way. So the cold snap has eased up and temperatures should be about 4 to 5 degrees higher than yesterday. But it looks like most of the country could expect mostly sunny skies throughout the day. And tomorrow will be the mildest day of the week here in the capital. We'll have weather that's almost balmy compared to what we've been having, with temperatures rising to 7 degrees Celsius. And the upper parts of the nation will have temperatures soaring to nearly 10 degrees with some clouds. And on Saturday, it's going to be a rainy one. The entire nation is expected to receive rainfall throughout the day, but temperatures should be on the mild side. but the rain will bring a slight chill to the air on Sunday. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul will get up to 5, and Daegu and Gwangju should see a high of 8 later in the day, while Busan tops out at 10. Now for other regions, it looks like Jeju will climb up to 9 in the afternoon. Daejeon will get up to 6, while the top temperature on Kumgangsan Mountain will be at -2. Now that's Korea for you, and here's the look at the weather conditions around the world. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and let's send it back to Mark and Yusan in the studio.
Well, thank you very much for the weather there, Jian, and those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I will be back at noon tomorrow, but in the meantime, stay with Arirang for the day's headlines.